We are at the Water Center. I think we are all at the Water Center and online through YouTube. The first item on the agenda is introductions and attendance. And Corey, would you like to do a roll call?
Yes. Chair Cole-Hansen.
Here.
Mr. Gibbs.
Here.
Mr. Raybould.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Mr. Van Stone.
Here.
Mr. Baker.
Here.
Mr. McMahon. And Mr. Olmstead.
Yeah, I'm Matt Weaver today.
Sounds good.
Pat McMahon, I'm online.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Pat. See a vacant seat over there. Okay, so everybody's here. Next item on the agenda is the Aging Infrastructure Grant Awards.
Very good.
Neely, I guess that's you.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, members of the board. I'm going to share my screen here. So tomorrow you'll be asked to consider a funding resolution. The board will be asked to consider a funding resolution recommending AIG grant awards. Today, staff will briefly talk through the staff recommendation for the Finance Committee. As you'll recall, the Aging Infrastructure Grant deadline closed this past August. The board received 45 grant applications requesting a little over 31 million. Just briefly want to highlight some of the elements of the criteria. First off, the board defines an aging infrastructure water project as any project intended to repair, maintain, replace, or improve existing infrastructure that supports irrigation, water delivery, storage, drainage, treatment, and use of water for irrigation. The grant award limit is $2 million. The board grant portion cannot exceed 50% of total project costs. And then water efficiency projects or ones that reduce incidental recharge will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And staff has developed those recommendations into the scoring sheet. And that was a new element in the criteria this past year. And then no more than 50% of the budget may be spent in any single district. And I don't think that's going to be an issue this time. So staff has scored and ranked the applications based upon the criteria. And here I'm going to show you that. See if I can zoom in just a little. I'm not going to ask you to do a lot with this. I just want to make sure you can read it. So here you can see the 45 applications. And here's the board district and the score as based on the criteria and then the amount of funding requested. Then we've got a column that speaks to primarily if the project had a seepage reduction or not, if it was partial, yes or no. And then some others here, like one is listed, we have a note here about this lagoon wastewater reuse project, and then that this one was a conversion, has been awarded conversion grant funding. So that has affected the staff recommendation. And then lastly, we have a column here on the far right showing whether the project is in a groundwater management area or a critical groundwater management area. And then staff has prepared this recommendation column. And this is a column that recommends funding. Some of these projects have requested much more funding than what is recommended. What staff has attempted to do here is carve out the portion that doesn't have a seepage reduction component and recommend those projects for funding, but not the seepage reduction portion. There are a couple in here I would that you may notice where there is a seepage reduction component, but staff has determined that the benefits outweigh the seepage reduction. And staff has looked at those on a case-by-case basis. So with that, I would highlight here that the second to last column is what staff is recommending. And that would be a total of $20,919,008.21. Again, you have requests for over 31 million. This would allow you to fund about 36 of the 45 projects based on the staff recommendation. And then based on this scoring here and this staff recommendation, I have prepared a resolution with an attachment A for full board to consider tomorrow. I'll just briefly show you that. It's a very straightforward resolution, one the board has considered in the past. And then we have an attachment A based upon the scoring recommendation and the seepage reduction recommendation. And that's the full $20,919,008. And so that I would stand for any discussion of attachment A, the draft resolution, the scoring with the seepage reduction component.
So committee members,
Madam Chair, I have a question. Some of the folks from up at ARCO have been talking to me about the Timber Dome one. So the Timber Dome, they're showing, now it shows it didn't get any funding, is that right?
Correct.
So the seepage on that one, that's all well water put into a ditch. So it all starts as groundwater. And even though there is seepage, you know, it all starts as groundwater and then they take it down the canal and then they use it down there from there. So I guess, is that a condition where the seepage wouldn't be a, I mean, because it all starts out as well water, I guess, that's the question.
I think that's a good point. We could take a look at that again today and be able to speak to those specifics tomorrow, I think. But if that is the case, we could add that recommendation back in for those funds.
Okay, well, I took a tour up there last week with one of their folks and.
Well, a follow-up to that, if I could, Madam Chairman. If in fact it is groundwater, and this is a project to keep are they proposing that they would pump less groundwater because they're not losing so much? So they're not recirculating half the water and save power? Or is this a proposal to pump the same amount of water, not have the incidental recharge, and then have more consumptive use?
That is a question I can't answer. What they have is they had a section line and their liner they didn't install it right. And so they take it about 6 or 8 miles down to where they farm from where they have a well field along the canal.
Oh.
And so I think that's.
So this is replacing a liner that's already there that has failed?
Yeah, that's kind of, well, or I think some of it, they're gonna line a little bit more of it, but it starts out as it's all groundwater to start with. So I guess that's a question I can't answer, so.
I'm sorry to be talking over you, Madam Chairman.
okay.
Madam Chairman, I think if we could have staff review this today and maybe come back with an answer to that question before the board takes action on this tomorrow. And if there is ultimately a groundwater savings component to this project, and it is in fact aging infrastructure that's failed that needs to be replaced, we maybe ought to consider that. We could probably fund that in addition to what we have here. I think we have adequate funding within the aging infrastructure allocation to do that. So maybe we ought to look at that if we can turn that around that quickly.
Madam Chair, staff can do that. We can take a look at this and be prepared to answer that question either later today or tomorrow. And if this is indeed have a groundwater savings component, we can add in a recommendation for funding for that project without reducing funding for the others that are currently recommended.
Okay. So hearing that, would it be appropriate to move forward with a recommendation to the full board or pass on that?
I think you could move forward with the recommendation with the caveat that we may or may not add in this additional Timber Dome project at tomorrow when the final vote is taken. But you could certainly make a recommendation to move forward with the rest of the recommended projects.
Okay, are there any more questions for Neely before I ask for a recommendation motion? From any of the board members? Pat? No? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the full board for these aging infrastructure grants with the caveat of looking further into the Timber Dome.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. I'll, we just do a voice vote.
vote for this, Madam Chair.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Madam Chairman, there's a couple of these projects that have my fingerprints on, so I'm abstaining from the recommendation. Will be abstaining from the vote tomorrow, but nonetheless, I support the overall list.
Okay, duly noted. One whatever the word is. Is that a new word?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Moving on. The second or third item on the agenda is the secondary aquifer planning management and implementation fund.
Yes, Madam Chair, Wesley will present that item.
Welcome, Wesley.
Good morning. Yes, I've got materials. And so if you remember back in July, we reduced the secondary fund by 3% from the general fund. And sorry, attempting to do two things at once, never my strong point. Have a hard enough time doing one thing. Okay. So this memo is in your material. And I'll make it a little bit bigger, so hopefully it's easier, but it doesn't change. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. That's it. Okay, now we can actually see it. So what this does is actually putting back the 3% that was taken out from the general fund, which was $150,000. And so what's been done is that increase, nothing else changes in the budget except for the very bottom, which is money that's reserved for work and other aquifers. And so if we look at the actual table, there's a resolution that goes along with this. And at the end of it, it hasn't updated. And so it's at the general fund where the 5,000 was increased. And then the only thing that it changed was way down at the bottom, this number down here. It was 500 some odd thousand, and now it's $748,135. That is the only change to the budget. I would stand for any questions.
Are there any questions from committee members?
Madam Chairman, I move we recommend to the full board to approve the modified secondary aquifer budget.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
And thank you very much. Next,
Excellent.
we'll have Cynthia present a modified or recommended modified water management account spending plan.
Which may be further modified tomorrow.
Correct. All right, good morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. Let's see here. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay. Let's see here. So, all right. Well, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee and board members. As Brian Patton mentioned, I'll be reviewing the water management account spending plan this morning. A little more comprehensive than the changes that were made to the secondary fund. So I've provided copies of what we'll be discussing here to you all today. And of course, the meeting materials will be updated. But what you've got, I think, before you is a copy of the spending plan, and we're calling it a second amended spending plan for FY 2026. got some highlights in there that I want to walk through. And then we also have a draft resolution that we can discuss if that's as appropriate. So let's see here. I'm gonna try and zoom in a little bit. Okay, let's see. So, all right. So you're, I think, generally familiar with the format at this point, but what you see at the top of the proposed spending plan is a list of the appropriations that the board and the water management account has received since FY 2020. The board has been budgeting funds for a large number of projects since that time. At this point, the total amount accumulated from 2020 on that in terms of just appropriations is about $397 million. Now, I just want to note here that this includes appropriations for some of the larger sustainability projects you've worked on, but also the flood management grant appropriations, water quality collection program appropriations that was not in the last version of this. That's something that was received from FY 2020 to 2022, and that dealt with some of the water quality work on the Mid-Snake. And then you've got some interest earned captured in there. So moving down to the first table, this summarizes, or I think captures the statewide regional water sustainability projects and various other large projects that were identified since those appropriations began. You're familiar with, I think, most of these, but I'll just draw your attention to the columns in the table. Of course, you got the project or program name, the amount budgeted, and some of that has changed. We can talk about that today. Then we've added a column that reflects the funds that the board is obligating. And that's, I think, an important topic. We just obligating under this resolution means that, or the spending plan means that the board is committing those funds by board resolution. And in many cases, those funds are also obligated under a contract. So again, those funds are committed, and in many cases, we're dispersing funds to pursue those projects. The final column on the right there shows funds expended. We've received questions about that in the past legislative session, so we've included that for your review today. That again shows how much money has been dispersed related to each of those projects to date. And again, this is current as of October 31. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just walk through some of these topics. You'll see that some of these cells are highlighted in blue, just again, for us to talk through a bit today. Mainly what that indicates is that we would like through this resolution for the board to consider just formally ensuring that these funds are obligated. In many cases, these projects have existed on the board spending plan for some time and have been considered obligated or being utilized in the planning phases of these projects, but we just want to formalize that in this resolution. So I don't know that I'll need to go through each of these individually. I will note that in the resolution itself on page 3, it's a hearty resolution. It's intended to capture the history of the appropriations, but also largely on page 3, it lists some of these items that we just wanted to make sure are captured in resolution, that so it's a little easier to track the obligated funds. So I'll start at the top. We've got Anderson Ranch. The board had obligated $10 million for that project. Most of the project is being supported with ARPA funding, but there's a recognition that ARPA funding may not cover all of the expenses of the project. And we know that some of the estimated costs from the Bureau of Reclamation do not include a couple of items such as mitigation water during construction. So this money is obligated for the purposes of the ongoing work on Anderson Ranch Dam raise. City of Gooding is the next one highlighted there. I bring that to your attention because you will see that is, I think that funding is obligated, but you will be requested, I think, on at the work session or the board meeting to increase that contribution from the City of Gooding. So this reflects that increase here. So that may be something that we consider tomorrow to ensure that the board is supportive of that increase. A couple of other items. We've got the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program that is implemented in part, at least from the state's side, by the Soil and Water Commission and Conservation Commission, and the board has committed $100,000 for the use of for administrative purposes. So that is, again, we want to make sure and obligate those funds, make that that funding available to the Soil Commission. The next line, there is $60 million for the Dvorak Clearwater Pipeline. That was a governor's initiative to try to support projects coming out of the governor's salmon recovery plan. This funding is also slated for other statewide special projects as needed. But again, this would commit those funds or obligate those funds. I'm going to jump down to the Mountain Home Air Force Base Resilience Project. The board had set aside an additional $10 million in the water management account. Again, that's a project where the board is using largely ARPA funds to complete that project. This money, this $10 million, is intended to ensure that any remaining items associated with that project are accounted for or can be funded, and may also be available for other regional projects in the Mountain Home Plateau Aquifer area. Again, that was part of the intent of the Mountain Home Air Force Base project, is to support aquifer resiliency in that area. Then we've got the Palouse Basin aquifer water supply planning. That's a large undertaking. The Palouse Basin PBAC has already, the board has actually contracted some of those funds already, over $100,000. And they're working on their project alternative that they've presented to the board. And the board had set aside $5 million, but we want to obligate those funds as that project is continuing forward. Raft River Pipeline, I might just jump through these next three items that are highlighted: the Raft River Pipeline, statewide recharge infrastructure, and the Thousand Springs Area Water Subordination Agreements. Those are all projects the board has set aside funds for the various needs in those basins, particularly the statewide recharge infrastructure. We know that there is interest, and the board has put some effort into looking into recharge opportunities in areas like the Treasure Valley, Mountain Home, Lemhi. There are other areas of the state that have an interest in developing recharge. So this would commit funds for those three project areas. And then finally, the last two items in this table, you'll see the Upper Snake River Basin Study. That is a project that's relatively new to the board. At your Twin Falls meeting, the board directed staff to submit a letter of interest to the Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart Basin Study Program. And Amy Castle is going to report on that later in your board meetings. To date, we have some positive indications that that project may have been approved, but we wanted to plan for that going forward. The basin study would require a 50% non-federal cost share. And so this would obligate funds on behalf of the state to provide that non-federal cost share for that project. And then lastly, the Upper Payette Basin Storage Water Project. That's an effort to try to secure uncontracted storage space in the Payette River Basin. We are working on that process with the water users, the Bureau of Reclamation. The board set aside $5 million for that, and we want to, suggesting that the board obligate those funds to pursue activities to further that effort. One thing I'll highlight here too is you'll notice that there's an asterisk on the side of a number of these. This is similar to what the board has, what we've done in the secondary fund. in that this, the funds are obligated for these purposes, given the scale of these projects. This would direct staff to come back to the board for some sort of further action prior to expenditure of those funds, knowing that they're fairly complex and they may involve a variety of different contracts and actions. So,
Could I get two eggs?
I'll stop there for a moment to see if board members or committee members have any questions at this point.
Committee members.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Stevenson.
on the Lewiston orchards, is Washington State doing anything about, is this Idaho the only one doing anything on this deal?
I believe you might mean PBAC.
Oh, PBAC.
Oh, PBAC.
Yeah.
That is a good question. Board member Stevenson, I might look back
Madam
at,
Chairman.
Neil Miller's not here.
It seems to me like we had a report from PBAC not too long ago that listed all the monies that have been allocated by both states working towards a solution for the Palouse aquifer. And Washington has contributed significant amounts to that. I think when we actually get to a cure, whether we choose to do that as an Idaho water supply program for the community of Moscow, or whether we partner with Washington, is yet to be determined by PBAC. But there have been significant amounts of money contributed by Washington as well.
That's correct.
Okay, that's the only question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, I will continue on. Oh,
I
Go
do
ahead.
have-
Yes.
Cynthia, could you remind me what that Thousand Springs line item is?
Yep. Well, Board Member Barker, I think we've got, Mr. Patton might have some comments about that project.
Mr. Raybould.
Okay, I'll take it. We're fighting over who gets to take credit for this.
I was thinking Cynthia should take it.
We're trying to resolve some issues in Thousand Springs reach of the river that have come up as to how prior agreements that the board has made with different entities in the area. And we're trying to resolve those differences of how those agreements have been interpreted, and it's going to require some effort on the board's part.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. Thank
Right.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Continue
Okay.
on.
All right, let's jump into the next tables there, I think, on your second page. So this, I think what I want to spend a little bit of time here. This is captures all of the activities that board is funding to support the ESPA Regional Water Sustainability Program. And embedded in that, that includes the FY26 earmark, or the 30 million, the FY26 portion of the ongoing $30 million appropriation that the board received this past year. So what we've done is broken this. We wanted to illustrate all of the funding that is being dedicated towards ESPA sustainability activities, and also those activities that support the 2024 mitigation agreement between the groundwater and surface water users. So I'll start here. I think you're familiar with these various categories. They include the creation of some new grant programs. But again, we wanted to make an effort to ensure that the funds that have been slated for the ESPA are obligated. So the first two items there, the ESPA Snake River Aquifer Improvement Programs, and then improvement projects for the Blackfoot to Minidoka reach gain efforts. That was $10 million in total that the governor actually directed the board to commit to ESPA improvement projects. So, and that was later split into $5 million associated with each of those efforts. Then you've got ESPA recharge infrastructure. You've had a couple of rounds of conversion projects. So that's groundwater to surface water conversion projects. That's a grant program. And so you can see here how much funding was obligated through the first round in FY 2025. And then in 2026, you've recently approved round one. There is some remaining funds, or there are some remaining funds from the amount that the board originally budgeted for the conversion projects. And so what we've shown here is the $6.6 million to be committed to a second round of conversion projects in FY 26. Now, and that one, you'll notice that there's an asterisk, mainly because that application round has not been rolled out. So we know that staff would need to come back to the finance committee and the board to get approval for awarding those grants. The last item in that first table is a Twin Falls Canal Company efficiency project. The board awarded funding about $26 million towards that project. What you see here is 19 million of that obligated through the larger sustainability project, and then lower the remain in the earmark. So the board can use portion of that $30 million appropriation to fund the remainder of that project. Now, I should mention in previous meetings, when this project was first awarded, the board considered only allocating a portion of this project from the water management account and this year's $30 million appropriation, and then set aside funding from future years, future $30 million portions of the $30 million appropriation, so that ongoing appropriation. What we've done here is rather than apply that funding over a number of years to that ongoing appropriation, is we've pulled it back and applied that funding to come out of the funds that you currently have available in the water management account. So that increases your obligation to that project out of your current appropriations. If we jump down to the $30 million earmark, again, we wanted to, I guess, just track this somewhat independently. If you recall, the direction from the legislature requires that that money be spent this year on the ESPA, and that it also be split. Half that funding needs to be directed towards Water Board District 3 and half in Water District Board 4, or District 4. And I do have a slide on that a little later. That's also in your packets. But what you'll see then is that that the board is applying that $30 million to a number of different types of programs and grants, and is trying to distribute those funds equally across those districts. So, so in terms of the obligations to date, then you've already awarded funding for the measuring and monitoring grant, ESPA recharge infrastructure. Again, some of the money from this year's earmark was being applied to the conversion projects grants, and to the efficiencies program. Those two projects are with AFRD2 and the Twin Falls Canal Company projects. And then the last two items in there are new to you all today. One of them, the first one, is the ESPA groundwater measurement database. That is funding that could be slated, used by the department to develop an internal database, basically build off their existing WMIS program, to allow for the collection of the groundwater measurement data that is required under the 2024 mitigation agreement. So that is going to be a fairly comprehensive effort on behalf of the department. And so we're recommending that some funding be set aside for that. I know the department is already queuing up the development phase of that and has a need to access that funding fairly quickly. And that is, you'll notice in your resolution that we built in language that states that the department would have access to up to $50,000 of that immediately upon the approval of the resolution, but we'll need to come back to the board to get authorization to expend the remainder of the funds. The second item here is the IDWR Underground Injection Control Program support. And that relates to some of the efforts that the UIC program is taking to address the review requirements of some of the injection wells that have been proposed for recharge efforts, particularly over in eastern Idaho and by the board. So they are proposing to bring in additional technical support, outside technical support to review those applications. And so under this proposal, and as written in the resolution, this would authorize expenditure of up to $100,000 per year for the next 5 years. And that is what that $500,000 obligation would commit the board to.
Okay, let's pause there and ask some, please, time for questions. Does anyone have any questions on these two sections?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So on the ESP underground database, is that just gonna be used for the ESPA or is that gonna be used statewide?
So, are you talking about the database or the UIC program, Dean?
The database part.
Database part. So, I mean, the immediate need is, for somewhere for the water masters to house that monthly data collection that the groundwater districts will be submitting. And the department's existing WMIS database is not set up to do that for groundwater diversions. They just house the annual number. The expectation is that the water masters have some place to put it where it's accessible by everybody else. So the immediate need will be the ESPA. I think once that's done, it potentially could be expanded to other areas if there's becomes a need to house that monthly groundwater pumping data in other areas of the state as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have an additional question, Cynthia. The amount of money that's been obligated, we've already obligated the Twin Falls Canal Company's money in a previous meeting. So it's highlighted in blue. It's not included in the resolution. Is it only highlighted because rather than spreading it out over multiple years, we're putting it in this budget at this time?
That is correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. My intention there was to make sure that I brought that to your attention, that this is a distinct change from what the original approval authorized. Again, that committed future funds. Under this scenario, the board is committing all of the funds to that project with its current appropriations in the water management account. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. All right.
And I might actually, I think there is actually a reference to that in the therefore be it resolved in the resolution.
I was just reviewing the bullet points there.
Yeah. So that is captured in therefore be it resolved, and we can talk about that as well. Okay. All right. Well, the last comment I'll make about this table is just to bring to your attention that what you're seeing here is from the $30 million earmark. All $30 million is committed or obligated under this spending plan, and you'll see that there is a total for the funding that is being spent on the ESPA in general. And so in total, the board is budgeting and obligating over $93 million towards the ESPA. All right. And moved on to the last, let's see here. Okay. All right. The rest of the spending plan, I think you're real familiar with. This table highlights the aging infrastructure grants. To date, you have awarded 5 rounds of grants, and we're discussing the round 6 just a few minutes ago. Madam Chair already referenced the fact that this may need to change depending on how the board votes on its approval and award of those different projects. Right now, what is referenced in here, this $20.9 million is based on the recommendation that Neely just put before you. So if the board changes its recommendation, then we can modify that in this resolution. What you see in round 7, which would be scheduled for the next fiscal year, is the remainder of some of the funds available in the water management account that are not already allocated. Our sense is that this is a fairly popular program. It's addresses infrastructure needs statewide. So the proposal was to obligate more funds for future aging infrastructure rounds. But we're certainly happy to take feedback on that. I might also just note here on the aging infrastructure grants, because the question has come up, that in some of the earlier appropriations to the board, there was a requirement that 1/3 of those appropriations be spent on grants, on the aging infrastructure grants. That totaled $75 million, but the board has made the decision to go ahead and commit more than that $75 million to aging infrastructure. And that's why you see that budgeted amount of $102 million as opposed to $75 million. Okay, so moving on to the flood management grants. Again, that one, this has become a fairly, I guess, productive and grant program for the board. You're looking at, I think, 8 or 9 years now. The board elected at the special board meeting to go ahead and offer another round in FY 2026 to use to allow more applications for flood management grants. And what you see here, and the reason this is highlighted in blue, is that of all of the appropriations for this program, the board has roughly $794,000 to commit to this next round of flood grants.
Down here.
Yes.
Hey, what's the deadline for this, for the second round? Have you set that yet?
Let's see, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chair and Board Member Barker, we have not set that date yet, but the intent is, I believe, to get it out by the beginning.
Maybe you could phone a friend, Cynthia.
Yes.
We did.
January 2nd.
Oh, I do. Yes. See how good they are. January 2nd is the deadline for the next round.
That's what I thought. All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Okay, and then the remaining tables here really capture some of the other commitments the board has made. You have several loans that are committed out of, and where funding is obligated out of the water management account, about $5 million. And then you had a couple of other programs that the board set money aside for, or budgeted funds, the statewide efficiency and capacity improvements to canal systems and statewide monitoring and measuring. Based on this rebudgeting, we've got $5 million set aside for each of those. Those are not obligated to date. The board, I think, needs to take some additional steps to authorize those programs, but we want to make sure they're captured here. And then finally, the water quality collection program, again, that took place in the Mid-Snake. That was a total of $600,000 was appropriated over a 3-year period, and all of those funds have been expended, but that is captured here. So finally, what you'll see here is a remainder available at the bottom. And what that shows is that there is zero amount that is unbudgeted. And the board, of course, can take steps to modify the budget, though what we're through this resolution, you would be obligating approximately $386 million.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question for Brian, maybe on those water quality program studies. If we ever get a report that says here's what we found out. What are the numbers?
Yes, you did. Gosh, it was a couple years ago. There was a final report by the USGS. They came in and presented to you. If you need a copy of the final report, I can get it for you.
You can reference where I can find it, that'd be great.
We'll do that.
Madam Chair, at the beginning of this discussion, I probably neglected to mention what Wes pointed out about the secondary fund. And again, what this resolution also does is to reinstate the 3% reduction that was applied to the $30 million appropriation for this year and this year's flood grant appropriation. So those will be reinstated through this resolution. And then again, I'd like to give the board time to review the resolution. It is a long one, but I'll just quickly walk through the therefore be it's resolved. I think the chair has already mentioned that there is a list of the projects that we just walked through on page 3 of the resolution. Please let me know if you have comments or questions about that as you get time to look at this. But I will go ahead and jump to the therefore be it resolved. So this would allow the board to adopt a second amended spending plan for the water management account. On row 132, this also clarifies that projects marked with an asterisk in the spending plan are hereby obligated, but require potential additional action by the board prior to expenditure of funds. Row 136. So in accordance with the spending plan, and this references the Twin Falls Canal Company surface water efficiency project, authorized under an earlier resolution by the board, states that this shall be funded as part of the ESPA Regional Water Sustainability Program using existing water management account funds, including allocations from the $30 million FY26 earmark. Row 141, funding is authorized for the development of, this references the ESPA groundwater measurement database that we described. And the last sentence in this resolution states initial development activities up to $50,000 are authorized under this resolution without further approval by the board. The next, therefore be it resolved, states that funding is authorized for the UIC program support, and also states that this authorizes funding up to $100,000 per year for 5 years and expenditure of up to $100,000 without further approval by the board. So that will give them the opportunity to jumpstart that effort. I think the remainder of these therefore be it resolved are fairly standard, but I'd stand for any questions on that front.
Okay, I have one question I'm going to ask. The 50,000 for the authorization for the database, is that just to go out for bid or contract? Or
Madam Chair, I can field that question.
Okay.
It's gonna cost a little bit of money to scope it,
okay,
you know, and to get potential firms out to scope it and help determine what the department needs. And then once there's a plan in place, then we'll bring that back to you for authorization for the rest of the dollars.
okay. Sounds prudent. Any other questions for Cynthia?
Madam Chair, I do want to, if there are no questions right now, I want to highlight one last table that I think you have in your packet. And this is just recaptures the same table that we just reviewed on the Regional Water Sustainability Program for the ESPA. But off to the side, you will see the split between the board districts 3 and 4 for the $30 million appropriation. And I just want to note that since the board has supported such a variety of projects through a number of different programs, what we're finding is that that split seems to be falling out nicely. And you'll see the different breakout between the different types of projects and how they overlay those two districts. So we're looking at a roughly 50-50 split based on the way that you've obligated funds to date, or at least under this spending plan.
Thank you for that. I believe that was one of the requirements of the 30 million, so.
That is correct.
Looks like Mark outspent Dean by just a little bit.
Is there any rebuttal on that comment? All right,
Okay, well, thank you. I have nothing further. Please let me know if you have any additional comments about the resolution.
okay, I'm looking for a motion to make a recommendation to the full board. With one potential modification to the aging infrastructure grants. Number dependent on the review of the previously mentioned one with Neely. Timber Dome, thank you. And,
Madam Chairman, I so move.
I second it.
okay, it's been moved second. Recommendation to the full board. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for this work.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
It's very helpful, and I'm sure it's not the last modification, but it's the most current one.
Last one this week.
Last one this week.
Yeah.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the Lost Valley Reservoir Enlargement Project update. And we have, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Doug Jones. Thank you, Doug.
Well, I'll just take a moment, Madam Chair, to just introduce Doug. He is here today to give us an update, of course, on the Lost Valley Reservoir Raise Project. And so again, wants to cover some of the progress that they've made and also introduce a potential request for a loan to the board and discuss a grant program that they're going to pursue to try and secure some additional funding to support this project. So
Looking forward to hearing this update.
Good morning, board members. Chairman of the Finance Committee. As Cynthia indicated, I want to give you an update. We've made significant progress since I last talked to this group. And Madam Chairman, I know this is the Finance Committee, but since we've got the whole board here, I probably will reference for the whole board's benefit in my discussion. So since I last visited with you, we have had hired Sundance Consulting to start on the EIS work. I think I told you at some meeting previously, we met with the Forest Service, with the Forest Supervisor and his whole management team of the Payette Forest. That got delayed a month back last spring because of the Doge cuts that hit their staff pretty hard. They lost 45 people in the Payette Forest alone. But we did make that presentation. They gave us verbal approval within about 2 weeks to move ahead with the EIS work. So we had hired Sundance Consulting to do that work. Sundance has gone out over the summer and done all of the field work that needed to be done in the period of time when you can access the reservoir summer. And we are now at the stage of doing the write-up work. Sundance is preparing all of the various segments of those reports that have to be prepared for an EIS. Back to the Forest Service, they gave us the verbal approval last spring. But out of those cuts they received, they didn't have anybody to write up the paperwork and give us the official hard copy of the approval. For several months, we did not get the hard copy of that SF 299 approval until October. We have it now. We have what we haven't got, because they weren't working the last 40 some days, is the bill from them. We know what it's going to be, but we haven't got the paperwork to say, here's what the Forest Service needs. But that is coming. They had told us in the approval that we would have a bill in October. That was before they all went on leave. So we will have that bill and are moving ahead with all of that process. Sundance's estimates of next steps, the preliminary draft EIS is anticipated for March of 26. That's really not that far away. And the final, there's some mandatory comment periods in there. The final EIS is anticipated for 9/11 of 26. So next fall, once we have received that, we can then start to move ahead with logging or dirt moving or whatever might be appropriate. And we are going to meet, we being the consultants to the project, with the engineer, Nick Kraus, in the next few days to get his update on the actual construction phase when we get the Forest Service approval. One additional update on the water piece of it. In the process of marketing the new storage space, we went out and marketed that space at $35 an acre foot of storage space. That's at-risk money to people who wanted more storage. We sold all of the space. In that process, we set some criteria. We're going to offer it to existing space holders first, other people in the Weiser Basin second, and finally anybody else who might be in it potentially interested. We sold a little over 2,900 shares of that space to an Eastern Idaho groundwater district. The reason they are interested is that water space in Lost Valley can be traded for fish water downstream to keep wet water in Eastern Idaho. Since that happened, that was all done to qualify for the matching piece of the grant that the board gave us. We have been approached recently by a different Eastern Idaho groundwater district who has expressed interest in buying any and all additional space that might be available. Now, the reason there is still some space is that, as we've told the board numerous times, we as the consultants to the project get paid in water when the project's done.
Space.
Space, potential storage space for water. And our share, our payment will be 4,000 acre feet of storage space, which when the project is completed, we will then market. We've offered the board numerous times if the first opportunity to have that space if they wanted it. If you, the board, are still not interested in that, we have obviously a willing buyer in an Eastern Idaho groundwater district. So that's the status of the project. We're moving through the EIS. We have timelines, estimated timelines for the draft and then for the final. And once the final is approved, which happens basically almost immediately after it's submitted next fall, we're then ready to go to construction. So our request today actually has to do with a grant, not from you folks, but a federal grant. And that's the handout you were passed around. It's a Bureau of Reclamation small storage program. This is not new. And I'm going to just walk through this very quickly so we can touch on 2 or 3 things. First of all, this grant program is limited to the 17 western states. And it is for water storage capacity between 200 and 30,000 acre feet projects to qualify. And if you look at the overview, it tells you that. It also tells you in the small storage program funding that it can be up to 25% of the project. Now, don't ask me the real number, but our estimate for this project is 15.7 something through construction. Round numbers, $16 million. 25% of that is $4 million. That's what this grant would be worth to us, to you, to the water users collectively. So we think it's worth going after. If you go on to the additional requirements, The last one on that particular page says there is sufficient non-federal funding to complete the project. Now we get to our request to you. And our request to you, and as we walk on through this, needs to be completed within 3 years. There's $43.5 million left to be granted out. And this is the last round of this grant. The timelines for it. Well, first, the summary of previously funded projects. And this slide deck came from a webinar Bureau Rec, or I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bureau Rec did last August. So this is their slide deck. But they have only awarded 2 surface water grants in this program, and this is the 3rd and final round of it. So we think we have a good chance there. The timelines, they want us to pre-apply by February 13th, with a final application due in April, award to be happening later in the summer of 26. So that's the timeline. What we need, and our request to you folks, is a loan. Now, we're going to ask for the loan without any details today, because we know we're not at a point where we probably meet the normal requirements. But it would be important for us to have an approved loan so that we can meet the requirement of the federal grant to move ahead and try to qualify for this $4 million. Now, what our request to you today is for creative thinking, and you being collectively the staff in the back of the room as well, of how do we write a loan application for you to be approved by this committee, recommended to the full board, probably for the January meeting or maybe for a special meeting, that we can then put on our federal application and say we have an approved loan to meet the non-federal funding requirement. And if we were to win the grant, that makes the repayment of that loan much easier, because now we're down to $12 million to be repaid instead of the 16. So that's our request this morning, is to let you ask questions and then do some creative thinking about how we go about doing that, to craft that loan application for you, and recognize that certainly we're willing to accept caveats on that pending completion of the EIS and things of that time would be certainly acceptable requirements for that loan to move ahead. So that may not be the only requirement. Somebody here or on the staff may have some other thoughts, but that's our request today. We wanted to give you an update on this grant program progress and ask for some creative thoughts. And I'll try to answer any questions you may have about this and where we are in the process. So,
All right, thank you for that.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Raybould.
I would think one of the first things we would need to see is something from the investors who have put down the initial capital for this project, the shareholders, I guess you would say, of a willingness to become encumbered to pay back the loan. Does that make sense?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Raybould, not an unreasonable request, because there's, I don't know how many, maybe 100 people who have spoken for water, as many as 1 and 2 shares and as many as blocks in 1,000 or more. But we won't have an annual stockholders meeting until March. if we have a resolution from the board of the Lost Valley Reservoir Company, would that be sufficient to answer your question?
Probably. I'm just wondering how, and at the end of the day, how we would handle this, if we would try and do this out of our existing funding as a direct loan for the project, or if this would be something that we would actually go out, do bonds for, or
Just handle it through the loan program.
just handle it through the loan program. So this is a good deal. I think as a group, we've talked about this before, perhaps being able to utilize this small storage program to help fund your project. So we probably want to put everything in place to give you the best opportunity to acquire that grant. So I think we're willing to work with you, but I think there needs to be some sort of a sense, maybe even in addition to the board, if you could get some of the more major stockholders or space holders to sign off and say they're willing to repay a loan. I think that would help us, and then we'd have to hold some kind of a lien against the space until it was paid off or something like that. But I think it's all doable.
Madam
Yes.
Chairman, Mr. Raybould, that's exactly what we want today, is to some creative thinking about how we do this so that we can work with you and with the staff to craft something to bring back to you that meets our requirement for the federal finance grant application, but is still acceptable to the board. And we know this is a little out of the ordinary, but we too think it's a great deal and don't want to miss the opportunity to do this. So that's why I'm here today, is say, put on your hats and think about this, how we craft it. And let us work with staff and with any of you in the meantime about suggestions and things you might like to have in it, or how we may negotiate some of that to make it acceptable to you as the board to let us qualify for this federal grant.
Yes, I do believe the last time the Lost Valley came before us for a loan, the two issues were repayment and collateral. And I think we're still there, but the amount of money that's needed is significantly less. So hopefully you can bring back a proposal that will satisfy us.
Madam Chairman, I think we can probably come up with a very short list of 10 people or less who would represent maybe half of the water storage space available, that I think would be willing to make that kind of a commitment. There are 2 or 3 of the board members who have large blocks of water. There are a couple other folks who, the Eastern Idaho Groundwater District. And the ones that are committed is American Falls Aberdeen. So I think we can come up with that kind of a short list and a board resolution or a letter or something from those folks that says, yes, they're willing to stand behind the payments.
Well, this is certainly interesting. The feasibility study, who do you have on task to do? Does the Bureau of Reclamation do that feasibility study, or can you outsource that?
Madam Chairman, we can outsource it, and actually the feasibility is part of what Sundance is doing as part of the EIS.
Okay,
So some of that work's already ongoing. Part of that feasibility will include the fact that we've already marketed all of the space. We have letters of support from county commissioners in both of the counties that are impacted, the local economic development folks, the Water Users Association, a long list of people who are in support of the project. And that will become part of the feasibility that Sundance is preparing.
okay. Just wanted to make sure that the money that we allocated for the EIS included the feasibility so we can get this portion done
Yes.
to
We-
apply for the loan. the
We've
grant?
already had a couple of meetings with some of their staff. We've sent them a whole list of documentation, all of the support letters I just mentioned. So they are working on that as we speak.
Excellent. Any other questions for Mr. Jones? Ryan?
Madam Chair, Doug, so the resolution would be from the board of the Lost Valley Reservoir Company or from these investors? Resolution to obligate.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, I think it could be one or the other, or probably both. Because some of the people who would be willing to support it are also the board members of the reservoir company. At least 3 out of the 4 board members I know, because I looked at the list yesterday, have committed to significant blocks of the new water.
But to build the dam to Marks Reservoir, you need to have resolution from the stockholders of the Lost Valley Reservoir Company. And so you'd need I guess, a majority vote. Is that all to take in the Lost Valley board?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, yes, I think a majority vote of the board. The stockholders have an annual meeting. Can't remember if it's the first Monday of March, but anyway, along in that time period, where we give them an annual update. They elect the board members. So I think the resolution from the board is probably adequate. And the individual letters from some of the largest individual stockholders, I think, are very doable as well.
All right, well, we can ensure that our board staff works with you to get that application submitted.
Madam Chairman, that's all I wanted this morning, was to stimulate some thought and discussion to work with the board and with the staff between now and I know the holidays are upon us starting next week. But to get some of that prepared for you as the finance committee and for the board as a whole for next January's meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions, I'll go sit down.
I think you're right with that.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, we're now to the item of other items.
And nothing more from staff for the finance meeting, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.